What's up, everybody? Good morning. I'm here with a picture of Alex. I guess he's working on connecting via Linux, and drivers can be fun. It's been a good week. We had the developer update yesterday. Earlier this week, we had our first community chat regarding 6.0. Those of you that don't know, 5.0 was a node version that kind of optimized smart contract costing in block space. And so far, we've seen a lot of performance improvements across applications, which is what we were looking for. So it's been great to see. We have our weekly developer get-together on Wednesday on Discord. We're also starting a ongoing conversation in terms of EIPs moving forward. That way, developers, community members, miners, whatever, can contribute into the thought and design of the next node iteration. That's something that it's pretty exciting to see. There's a variety of options on the table in terms of scaling Ergo, both on the base layer and potentially putting forth a variety of frameworks for layer 2 scaling. There's also potential to increase the support that we have for Sigma protocols. There's also a couple of application level optimizations that a variety of developers are kind of discussing, and that's an ongoing conversation. It's important for community builders, miners to all get involved and ultimately contribute. It's kind of the point of a decentralized network, is to try to get the collective mind share of people that are peers in our network to interact, engage, and ultimately assist us in building the future. That's kind of an interesting concept moving forward. I know that a lot of people look to the Ergo Foundation to kind of lead that conversation, and we're happy to, but over time, I think really the optimal result would be to create an association of companies, maybe some kind of DAO around the longer term maintenance and development of the core protocol. Now, we're not there yet, but it's certainly nice to see some of the developers that have come on and built their business around our network be more engaged. And ultimately, I think that at some point, having greater decentralization and mindshare, varying opinion, debate around what is best to support the network is really the path forward in this case. Those of you that are not familiar, that's something that we see specifically around Bitcoin. There was a foundation at one point that didn't seem to manage money very well, but it kind of evolved to where now you have multiple entities that are all discussing and sometimes debating potential improvements or changes or mechanisms of support for that protocol. And I think that's a nice vision for us to follow. Over time, moving away from a single core is going to be important. Now, the Ergo Foundation exists because, number one, we came to market with a new smart contracts model, right? And so a big part of our mission has been the development of, let's say, extended UTXO, open source frameworks, and that's been all kind of given to the community, right? We haven't commercialized anything. It's been the goal to simply build tools with this new smart contract model and try to engage the community to contribute. And we've seen a lot of that. I think in the history of our network, we've seen hundreds of community developers that have come and gone, but sometimes that's how life works in these systems where people have jobs, families, competing let's just say priorities in life, and time and energy are always scarce resources. So, people need to manage that the best they can. The other side has to do with market access, right? A lot of the times I hear this idea that, you should launch a network and, have nobody be able to represent it. And that actually creates kind of a legal bottleneck, right? I've seen exchange forms. I understand the backside of the industry enough to know that you have to have a legal counterparty in order to list in an exchange or do agreements with kind of the business aspect. And you hit this weird scenario where that exists, right? There's no way around that. You're not going to be able to list at a larger exchange without them having some legal counterparty to cover liabilities. And so, if there's no transparency around who that is, it opens an interesting question, right? To where you may have a whale, because let's be honest, the costs often are not, let's say, cheap, that is coming in, has information asymmetry over the rest of the community, potentially is engaging in market making, which, having liquidity on markets is a positive thing. But if you have information asymmetry and you have that apparatus, you're in a potential position to trade against your community, exploit them in some way, in my opinion. So, whenever I hear this, we have no entity, but yet we have listings and yet we have this, I have to ask the question, who's the shadowy actor, right? At least, I can say that the Ergo Foundation is a nonprofit. It's not our job to try to create profit incentives and, grow our treasury and trade against our community. And unfortunately, we do see that, right? We do see that quite a lot in this space. And, for some reason, that's not seen as kind of sketchy. I think it is. And it's always a question to ask. If you're engaging in an ecosystem, who is representing, who's that legal counterparty? Because the reality is you can't do business without it. Now, would it be nice if exchanges, looked around at open source networks and said, wow, these characters are doing pretty well with, development and their tech stack is pretty impressive. We want to support that. And, that would be ideal, but that doesn't happen. It's just not reality. The reality is, you have to go through contracts, and then sometimes, you'll look at the application process and the legal review process, and you're talking hundreds of pages of paperwork. Somebody's doing that, right? Somebody's always doing that. This idea that, no, we're just an open ecosystem and nobody's doing that, in my opinion, is kind of a joke. So that's an assumption that I think that everybody in this industry needs to be aware of, right? Would it be nice if that counterparty wasn't needed? Absolutely. I would love it. The difficulty is, at this point, it's somewhat of a necessary evil in order to do business. So keep that in mind. The Ergo Foundation, is we have pretty solid runway in terms of the entity itself. We have, our next stage of development, which is going to be 6.0. And, long term, our goal is not to be the ultimate, let's say, top of the network, right? We would love to decentralize ourselves. And that's why we can continually call for, contribution and community support, because over time, having that, let's say, central entity, you have to in order to bootstrap business. The question is, how do we decentralize ourselves? And that's an ongoing question that takes community involvement. Looks like I have a question from Ergo. What will happen if the Treasury runs out? That's a great question. In the short term, we do have Treasury on chain, where burn rate is pretty predictable. One thing that, we have seen is some projects that are coming out and building on top of the Ergo ecosystem, have offered to make small donations, token allocations to the foundation that, is kind of a gift for, services that, we've done in development. If people build open source, I know Alex is always happy to, let's say, hop on and review it, sometimes give feedback. That's a part of the community mindshare. It's ultimately, in my opinion, the most important thing we can do in bootstrapping a technology is say, okay, well, how do we build mindshare? How do we build software development kits that make building easier? And, we also have to kind of look at the framework side where, research, development, expansion, of the actual model itself. And that's something I think as a community, we've done quite well at. The danger that we're seeing, I guess in some cases when people come to market with a new model and there's instant commercialization, is you don't really have that open source mind share, right? You kind of try to skip that process. And so, like, for me, I'd look at what has worked in the past. And I do think that for all the, let's say, drama and politics in the Ethereum community, from kind of the inception, their developer community did an amazing job at creating an open source mindshare around Solidity, to where, when it came out, it was kind of this nuanced new method of programming, and it's become so popular that the tutorials and documentation and code base and tools really have made moving into that ecosystem easy. And so, if you have a great developer environment, what you end up doing is attracting developers into that environment, right? If you don't have a great developer environment, some people are willing to kind of deal with the pain. We've had a lot of Ergo Hack participants that have come and assisted us. But ultimately, as we evolve on that side, I think the ecosystem gets more and more interesting, and entrepreneurs can come in, take that open source, let's say, cookbook mindshare tooling and try to implement their ideas with less work, which was great to see. All right, looks like Alex is hopping in at some point. Next, we have a question from Sahar, our favorite baseless.
Hello everyone. I'm sorry. After updating my Linux distro, Zoom is not quite working on my laptop.
Oops.
So how's my sound quality? By the way, I'm from a bad device now.
Oh, I can hear you.
All right, good to hear. All right, and congratulations everyone with 5.0 activation. Was it discussed?
Mm-hmm. Yep, we kind of covered that lightly in our transition into 6.0.
Nice.
Which is nice to see that community chat. I'm excited to see how things come together. I guess we're still in kind of the early planning stages, but it would be nice to see that formalized, where we start to get a roadmap together and start planning for the future.
All right, yeah, sounds good. So what is the question from Sahar about?
Sahar is one of our favorite shit posters from Baseless. He did actually build a Alphium wallet. So he said, is that bullish? I don't know if that's bullish or not, but it's good to see that Sahar's actually doing something other than whining. So that's progress. That's bullish on Sahar. He's doing something.
Yeah. So and he did own wallet. That's great, actually.
So the next question is from Augustus Kent. He said, is an extended bear market an advantage for Ergo? It feels like Ergo development is not slowing down. In a way, I think so. When we look at like these cycles in our industry, when you have this bear market, people start asking better questions, in my opinion. Where they start asking, okay, what are trust assumptions that I need to make? Because usually as things roll over, you get a lot of teams and projects that, were unable to deliver something or just never really had something they could actually deliver. And then you have counterparties that are blowing up. So people are asking better questions, and better questions are good. When you're talking about self-custody, when you're talking about trustless systems, I guess when markets aren't as good, there's less people getting lost to shiny objects, right? And sometimes in the crypto space, there's a lot of like shiny objects that promise a lot and deliver basically nothing. So I do think that that's an advantage, because good questions tend to lead to first principles. And I think as a community, we do very well in terms of, building with first principles, asking good questions, making it more about the technology than the hype. What's your take on that, Alex? You've been around for a while in the crypto space.
So during the bull run, there were a lot of complaints. Why are not we doing something like that's outstanding project Terra, right? Or why we are not doing partnership with another project, and so on, so on. Now, the space is much more clear, right? And still, clearing continues. So, not so much shiny scams around, right? A lot of bubbles already burst. So, in that regard, it's much better.
Yeah, I think the most interesting thing at the moment is this ongoing pressure for more transparency on exchanges. I think that's a good thing for the space, ultimately. We're getting like some idea in terms of people pushing for proof of reserves, but then you have to ask the question, does that represent any liabilities? And oftentimes that's not the case. So you're saying, we have X, but then you don't look at the liability side, and it really doesn't mean a thing. I'm curious to see how that plays out. I would love to see better transparency on that side, because ultimately, that's an intermediary that, unless you're mining, which is one of the benefits of mining, you kind of need to deal with that type of infrastructure to be in this space. So we'll see how that progresses. I think that's an interesting ongoing conversation that everybody should kind of follow, and hopefully we push for more transparency, better trust assumptions, because, that's kind of why these networks exist, right?
So, the only question when this extended bear market will end. By the way, why is it extended?
I don't know.
So it's hard to say, but I think, the Ergo ecosystem will survive, and will survive successfully in any situation and any duration, right, of this period, the bear market period.
Yeah, I'm excited. We have a lot of good stuff being built that just doesn't really depend on external partners or factors. All right, next we have QX. QX said, Joe, you spoke about the EF not always needing to be on top of the ecosystem. Can you talk about the Sigma program a little bit? Sure, that's a great question, QX. The Sigma program is a collaborative group that takes community members that want to contribute to the development of the Ergo network in some way. And it kind of creates this group mechanism where, you kind of come in and say, okay, what's your skill set? How would you like to contribute? How much time, energy do you have? Over time, I do think that the Sigma program will probably form a DAO. I would love to see some funding, not only from the Ergo Foundation, but potentially for projects, because now you have this internal, let's call it a service-oriented DAO, to where you have writers, you have technologists, you have graphic designers, you have all of these services that, if you build on the Ergo blockchain, you might need, right? And instead of going to some external actor, you kind of have the ability to pull from pooled community resources, right? And having that internal peer-to-peer economy is a great idea in terms of building awareness, content, services that any project would already need, right? I do think that over time, having that feedback of people that have their boots on the ground in the ecosystem gives a better perspective. Sometimes that's a difficulty in decentralized systems, when you do have like an entity in charge that, they kind of have a warped perception from, I don't know, in some cases like the ivory tower syndrome, right? To where they don't really have boots on the ground. They don't understand kind of the reality of the user experience, or the difficulties, bottlenecks, areas that need support. So having that community-oriented program, in my opinion, is huge long-term. I would recommend everybody that wants to be an active peer in a peer-to-peer network, look into the Sigma program, because it's a great group. What do you think, Alex?
Recently I did participate in a Sigma call. Actually, it was very good. So I believe soon maybe it will be better performing than EF's marketing group. Eventually, EF. Maybe we'll stop performing marketing internally even.
Yeah, I think over time that makes a lot of sense. It is kind of, will probably fall more to projects on top of the network, because ideally the Ergo base itself remains neutral, right?
Right. So, maybe in future, so it would make sense to have, more like association-like entity, right?
Yeah. I think that's a good plan moving forward. Now, maybe it's something that we start to put in motion in terms of, let's say, the roadmaps that we're coming together for the next phase. All right, Alex, you have a question from Windy Moon. She said, how much pride do you take in the 5.0 upgrade? It must have been a lot of work to get to this point.
Actually, it's a very nice interpreter update, and done without much pain. And because of issues with the previous version of interpreter, we had some network wide issues, right? A few times. Usually always self-resolved. So the network finally generated a block, but there were like 2 or 3 issues when we had no block for like 2 hours because problems with block cost.
Mhm.
Right. So during generation, verification costs were different, and it was very complex procedure, so it was almost impossible to even debug and fix. But for now we have simplified costing, right? And at the same time, the off-chain transactions verification issues are well resolved without the need for heavy costing. It seems it's now much better costing, much simpler, and we can continue to simplify interpreter. Already a lot of work done there, so I just reviewed PR from Morphic yesterday with 11,000 lines of code removed from the interpreter because of 5.0. And it's a nice update, and also it's better to move forward from this point. Other than from 4.0 interpreter.
All right. So the next question is, how's Dexi's development going?
Reportedly, there is backend code for minting contracts already, right? So tests are done for most of contracts already. I'm doing another round of reviewing contracts. So yesterday, found some issues. Actually found how to improve the payout contract, and before found some issues in extract to the future contract. I guess now we can start front-end implementation actually slowly, right, while continuing the audit of the contracts. And recently also Oracle Pool 2.0 with gold feed specifically was launched on the testnet, and after some time, maybe like 1 or 2 weeks, we can actually think about mainnet launch of the Oracle Pool on the mainnet.
Awesome.
And it seems around New Year Eve, maybe some estimated dates for the launch could be given.
All right. Look forward to that. Next question is from SK. What do you think about Thorchain and the possibility of Ergo joining the project? I think we actually had an offer to be part of Olympus DAO maybe a year ago. And, sometimes, that's not to say that's negative, but DeFi, in my opinion, is largely experimental, right? And in bull markets, people forget that, right? They're like, oh, the number went up. This is the future. This is the greatest thing ever. And so they stop asking critical assumptions about kind of the I don't know, framework, how it works, the validity of it, the long-term viability of it. And so, our approach was always conservative, right? Because, if there is a cost and then somebody wants you to buy their token to participate, that's not really our goal as a foundation. Our goal as the foundation is primarily, development oriented. And so that was something that we passed on, but, we also passed on, some interaction with Terra Luna, because the same thing, it's like, well, that one I didn't see it as very sustainable at all, but, we have to be careful because time shows strong designs, right? And DeFi is relatively new. I think that's a good lesson for the future is just because the number goes up really says nothing in terms of like the sustainability of something that's highly experimental. I think there's a lot of interesting stuff happening on Thorchain, absolutely. But, for us, it's a matter of, okay, what's the energy and resources that's needed for that type of partnership, right? And sometimes, in my opinion, it's a little bit out of balance, especially since you're dealing with code that's open source anyway. In that type of partnership, kind of we have to ask the question, okay, if this is really decentralized, anybody in the community could do that today, right? That's ideally the barrier of entry should just be you want to do it, you want to build it. But sometimes it falls on the plate of the Ergo Foundation, and that, in my opinion, doesn't always make sense. What do you think, Alex?
Yeah. So, talking about those DeFi partnerships. So, some results already are not quite good, right? Especially about Graviton, to be honest. It's hard to say, right? Especially during the bull market. Who will stay and who will fail? So, maybe now it's a better time, right? To find partners around with sustainable approach, right? So partners who will stay. But yeah, and I fully agree that the field is experimental and should be considered. So
yeah, but ultimately, what will show strong designs in DeFi is time and testing, right? Stress, and I think that kind of got thrown out the window. But usually, risk assessment gets thrown out the window when markets are hot, and they're like, "Oh, the numbers are going up; it's working." Right? It's great. It's the new thing. We certainly saw that with Luna this last cycle, where, the actual core assumptions that people need to really look at and say, okay, well, how does this work? Is this experimental? What are the risks? That goes out the window, right? And that's unfortunate. So, on our side, for any external partnership, we really try to just slow down, understand assumptions, and then convert it into, okay, what is the cost? What is the actual manpower or commitment that would be needed, not only to bootstrap it, right? But then you have infrastructure that you may have to support, and then who's going to support that? And, ideally, in my opinion, there's a profit incentive that pays for, the ongoing maintenance of that type of infrastructure. And that doesn't always plug in well on top of the idea of a nonprofit framework. Let's see. All right, so we've got a question from Tech Fabby. We'll start with you, Alex. I don't think people understand how much both of you have done and what projects you have worked on, gaining a tremendous amount of experience. Could you explain some of what you've done? I'll let you start with that, Alex.
Oh, you mean, well, I should tell my biography.
No, we don't have time for that. Just,
Oh,
yeah, what's your primary focus? Just start high level, simple, I guess.
oh, I mean, these days or previous years.
Yeah, let's go these days.
All right, so currently, yeah, I'm reading some papers, yeah, about subblock confirmation. So also DeFi, stable coins, right? So, well, it's actually interesting why, people think that some design could be stable, right? So you cannot find an answer in white papers usually. Yeah, that's Terra white paper is actually quite terrible in its reasoning. But yeah, I mean, more academic papers with designs like gyroscope and so on. So they are trying to do some work, and yeah, it's quite interesting to study and to compare different designs. Yeah, aside of that, also checking different off-chain solutions. For Ethereum, Bitcoin, and so on. So currently, actually reading some write-up called something like roll-ups for Bitcoin. Can put a link into the general Telegram chat, for example.
Awesome. Yeah, lately, let's say markets are not as good, and I'm trying to take time to get together with as many projects as I can in our ecosystem, ask them what they need, what their plans are, and just try to be of support, right? Certainly, it's a good time to start taking kind of the quiet and scoping out the roadmap or plan, and try to connect them with whoever they need to connect with, talk sometimes high level ideas in terms of their roadmap or partnerships or implementation. In terms of the core itself, I've been looking into the potential for ramping solutions, which would need to then be plugged into wallets because that's, where that makes more sense. But I think more than anything, it's just a matter of saying, okay, I've always said that if somebody builds open source, I'm on the team, and it's a good time to figure out how I can be best used by a variety of teams across the ecosystem. We have a good question here. How can someone without programming skills help the whole project? I would join the Sigmanauts group. There's a ton of talent that, even if it's documentation, if it's more, taking, higher level concepts and helping create the framework to where the average user can understand it, that type of translation sometimes is highly valuable. There's a ton of skills that everybody bring to the table. It's just a question of what that is and how you can use that to support your peers. I think Sigmanauts is a great group to potentially explore how you can contribute if you have the time and the energy and to do that.
Yeah, I think often tutorials and documentation in general is more valuable than code actually in many situations.
No, I
yeah, still there is a lot of demand for tutorials, documentation, and so on.
All right. We have a question from Hans, who said, where and when are the Node 6.0 discussions planned to take place? Not a big coder yet, but as a PhD student studying consensus, I would love to contribute any way I can. That's awesome.
Right, as some more permanent channel, right, with archival capabilities, unlike Discord. Well, actually, So I will also do 6.0 PR stop in GitHub, and then the different participants in the process. Well, actually, everyone can do a PR against this stop, and then we can discuss what to include and not. The forum, and also doing regular chats in Telegram and Discord. We have a bridge between.
All right. So next question is how to make Ergo a top 10 coin. The technology is amazing, but it looks like we lack some visibility in the crypto industry. That's true. We do lack visibility in the crypto industry, both probably on the marketing side and the market access side. Both of those are painful to deal with, unfortunately. The market access is not cheap. A lot of the times, exchanges have limited bandwidth, and so they will have a tendency to, number one, favor native tokens over actual layer one networks, just because of the cost and the time. It's more profitable. Then, if you look at a lot of the marketing in the crypto industry, it's in my opinion, pretty biased because, you have, let's say like CoinDesk, who then also is owned by, it's a subsidiary of, like Grayscale, which has its own fund and its own assets. It's in its interest to market. So sometimes I'd say there's not exactly impartial and fair journalism in this space, but that's okay. It is technology ultimately, and as we build that out, I think we will see more traction and adoption based on the functionality that we build. What's your take, Alex?
So it's already happening, right? Adoption is already could not be compared with 2019 when it was about just a few enthusiasts, right? 2020 when first contributors appeared around, like Anon Real, Ergo, and on 2020. Then 2021 was much more fruitful with more teams and so on. And currently I'm not even capable to track everything going on around. It's already going on. And I think in 2023, so it would be even better, definitely.
Absolutely. FC said, "Hey yo, sorry if I already asked. Can you briefly explain the EF not having augmented market making and the implications lower volume for in a projects that pump?" Yeah, that's true. So what is market making? Okay, that's an important first question. Market making has to do with providing liquidity on order books in market services such as exchanges, right? So if you list with an exchange, they're going to say, hey, we need our order books to be liquid. That way people can buy and sell with minimizing slippage, okay? Because if you don't have a lot of liquidity or no liquidity, it makes an asset more volatile, where if somebody wants to enter, there's a greater price movement. And if they want to exit, there's a, basically a dump. So what most, let's say on a basic level, usually you'll have ranges beyond spot, where let's say you can go on like CoinMarketCap and you can say, okay, well, what is the liquidity to the upside and to the downside within 2% of spot, right? That's generally one trading range where people will actively put liquidity. So, the price can kind of fluctuate within a range around that spot price, and then you can extend that and You can look at like at 5%, what's the trading depth? At 10%, what's the trading depth, right? Usually that it can be charted on an exchange, and it's something to be aware of. But it doesn't always necessarily indicate the actual market making capabilities, because sometimes you have liquidity on either side of a trade that is simply not on the order books, right? It's sitting there waiting for price movement, and then immediately a bobble movement, and kind of act to stabilize, that price movement. Now, the EF doesn't actively market make, meaning we try to stay neutral. We try to just say, okay, we're going to have an even spread on both sides of spot, at certain depths, whatever the exchange, requires. And we're just going to kind of float with the movement of ERG, right? So, in let's say times of sell pressure, there's going to be a tendency for the market making activity to move more to the ERG position. And then in times where there's buying pressure, we'll slowly kind of move more into like the USDT or BTC, depending on what the pair is, right? And having neutral market making, in my opinion, is pretty critical, because we have an information asymmetry over the rest of the market, right? We have a tendency to know what announcements are coming, or what partnerships are coming, or, when exchanges are going to list, right? And so if there's no, let's just say, neutral party that has that asymmetry, I think that's basically exploiting a community. I don't agree with that at all. Now, we also have an even sketchier thing that can happen in this space, which is called rebase market making. And basically what that means is you have actors that will go and they will get basically a loan on the side, and it'll come with a certain interest rate. And then they will trade that pair and try to cover the cost plus the interest rate on the loan, and keep the difference, right? And that's a very, very volatile, risky thing. And a lot of the larger funds that kind of blew up in this last cycle, I imagine, had very heavy rebate trading, and they were getting loans and trading pairs. And then not only were there let's say active trades failing, now they also have this counterparty that they own a loan to with a certain rate of return. And in many cases, it seemed as though that's how they were providing these yields in their TradeFi products. And risky business. In my opinion, it's pretty bad practice, especially when there's information asymmetry, because it's simply not a fair market. What do you think, Alex?
Yeah, I'm pretty much agree.
Yeah, and it's sad. I think it's more common. Like if you look at the liquidity, we get people that they say, how come your volume is so low? And then I'd say because it's a reflection of demand. Versus if you have a project that their market cap is $100 million and their trading volume is $100 million, and then you go and you look at the liquidity depth, and within, let's say, a 2% range, and it's $20,000 and $20,000, there's some sketchy shit happening there. There's no other way to put it.
Probably wash trading.
Yeah, probably, wash trading, or it's just not a transparent practice in our industry. So there's not really any, I guess, other way to put it, other than you have to know your assumptions, something to look into. And I've never heard projects actively talk about that, but in my opinion, it's an assumption that everybody in this industry needs to know and be aware of. Next, we say, let's see, this is Jadson. He said, you guys of the Ergo Foundation, please don't go with the ESG narrative like Flux did. Ergo uses a GPU only to mine, keep it decentralized. I tend to look at this from the perspective of seigniorage, right? Where the energy input cost creates a cost of production in proof of work. that is very valuable because it gives value to the resource, because it costs money to create Erg, right? And when you don't have, let's say, an input cost that is anywhere in the neighborhood of, let's say, the market cost, there's a tendency over time for that seigniorage to disappear. So, it creates a harder form of money. That's the beauty of proof of work. Now, you're basically using energy markets and computation, which, I would say, okay, energy markets do have, some areas with native advantages, but they are pretty global. I would say within the next 20, 30 years, probably the vast majority of humanity that, currently lacks basic infrastructure will see more infrastructure. And so it gives them the ability to leverage that infrastructure to participate in a global market. So I actually think using the power costs is a positive. I tend to fall into that side, primarily because of seigniorage, but as well as access, versus if you have a token where you kind of need a exchange or some type of financial infrastructure, that's more exotic than simple electricity. And it's simply not available in some areas. What's your take, Alex?
What's ESG is to start with?
It's kind of like this populist mindset that we need to do everything for social good of whoever creates the narrative what social good is, in terms of power is bad, and
Oh.
that whole
Yeah, but then that's what we are doing exactly right. So trying to create money without central bank, right? Trusted party with fair distribution. Proof of work is the only known mechanism for that, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the way to organize fair lottery.
Yeah.
And in regards with energy markets, so it could be seen as actually quite interesting way to move energy, right? So you can mine in areas with cheap electricity, which means excessive production, right? Excessive supply with not so much demand. Like it was the case in some mountainous areas in China. You mine there, right? So you convert electricity into cryptocurrency, then you can sell this cryptocurrency in other areas, right? And buy energy there, right? So it could be seen as kind of way to actually preserve energy, right? So not to lost it where there is excessive production of it.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting ways that proof of work can be used to stabilize grids and equalize markets. That's something that I hope we explore moving forward. I'm not against alternative energy. I'm not against, let's say, environmental protections. I live in the forest, and one of the things I do the most is pick up shit that people throw out of their cars or leave camping. And in my opinion, if we can't even pass kindergarten, these high level, we're going to do this and change society, it's a bit of a joke, because, I'm still out there picking up trash. Start with kindergarten and maybe advance from there. Let's see. The next question is, does each exchange need its own market maker? Depending on the exchange, big ones will, yes. That will be a term in the contract where they will say, okay, within these depths, we want liquidity. This is how much liquidity we want on our exchange. And, it's interesting. You could look at FTX, right? Every project that was listed there probably lost something because there were market making requirements, right? Now, depending on how big of a market it was for different projects, how much liquidity they allocated to that exchange, in some cases we just don't know. But yeah, I would say developed exchanges will require that because it's a competitive business, right? They're kind of competing with each other for volume and kind of customer allocation. So it's something that is a very common practice. And if you see a project that's listed on an exchange and they say, we don't have anybody that does anything because we're so decentralized, who's signing the contract? Who's the market maker? Like, that is really basic. It's like you have a car, where are the wheels and where's the gas, right? And that's part of how you participate in that type of environment. And unfortunately, it's usually just a secret. Let's see.
Yeah, I actually think that losses, FTX losses for projects were quite high. Because the requirements were high, as far as I know.
Yeah, no, when our discussion, they wanted $25 million a day of daily volume, which, if that's not organic, how do you do that? You do some funny business with market making, right? And that's a lot of tokens. That's a pretty high barrier of entry that obviously maybe that's why they were incentivizing projects to have that level of, let's say, liquidity, because in the end, they rugged them. Terrible.
Right. Yeah. Well, I guess there were also some requirements for order book depth, right? So then, those money lost, right?
Yeah.
For basically all the blockchain projects and cryptocurrencies listed there.
Yeah, everybody listed there had some exposure. Now what? Who knows? You can't really. Yeah. Let's see. How can we force people to participate and support Ergo in social media like Twitter or something? That's a funny question. I don't know. What do you mean force? Like, how forceful are you going to get? Are we going to just publicly shame them or flog them or what? It depends on people's level of engagement. I'm on social media, and a lot of the time, most of it's garbage. So I don't enjoy that terribly. Sometimes there's good content, but a lot of it's just noise. What's your take on that, Alex? How do we force people to participate?
Oh, yeah. So we cannot enforce people to participate. We can motivate, maybe. So there were some contests, right, run by Sigmanauts and so on. So maybe they will continue. Well, even in this case, right, so it's better to avoid low quality posting.
Yeah, I would agree with that. A lot of the times, in crypto, you have engagement, but you have to ask, what's the actual value of the engagement? I guess you could look at like somewhat ridiculous things like SafeMoon engagement, where, like what's the educational content? Nobody's asking good questions or actually helping push real peer-to-peer finance or decentralization. It's just more, give me a moon so I can dump on you. And I've never been a fan of that.
Yeah, so back in 2020, we had a listing with CoinsBit exchange. And we had some marketing campaign with them, basically giving some tokens to people joining our Telegram group and so on. And so, the group was invaded actually by crowds of airdrop hunters.
Yeah, we got infected, but I remember the chats were unusable.
So the chat was unusable for a few days just because, schoolboys from all over the world came to get some free money for lunch.
Yeah, free money. That's always popular. We have a good question here. I understand funds are running low. How will you keep using the allocated funds for exchange listings, or will you find an alternative way? Would you prioritize developers over listings? Well, we have the ability to move into liquidity depth via bridging, right? And I think Rosen is certainly a big step forward for the Ergo ecosystem in terms of market access, because we don't need to ask anybody's permission. We don't have to sign any contracts, and we don't have any costs. So you could ask the question, within Rosen's bootstrapping, we may see Ergo as a pair in Ethereum. We may see Ergo as a pair on Binance Smart Chain. We may see Ergo as a pair in Cardano and Avalanche, a variety of these networks, and that gives greater market depth. It's an unfortunate thing with exchange listings that you have these networks that develop open source technology that is literally free, and then the barrier of entry is quite high. In a way, you have to ask, how do these entities even claim to support actual decentralized networks when they're prioritizing pseudo blockchain nonsense and projects that come to market with nothing more than a really good marketing team and oftentimes don't last. I don't know. I wish that they were better stewards for actual decentralized technology, because, well, they're kind of the interface that the general public works with. But a lot of the times, in my opinion, they fail miserably in representing our industry and our technology. What's your take, Alex?
At this point, I think, it's better to wait for some time in regards with, getting on exchanges, especially if it's about paying anything, right? Because, well, it's hard to say at the moment who will fail from those sexes, right? So it would be very unfortunate to pay to see them centralized exchange to fail within days, for example. And now it's highly possible, right? Like for every exchange.
Yeah, I would hate to be a project that spent $1 million plus to list on FTX, had to move all this to an exchange to maintain market making, and they're like, "Sorry guys, we stole all your money." Like that's insane. So in a way, I think the burden of proof should be on these entities, to whether users trust them to put their money there, and projects trust them to be viable long term and actually have good practices. And otherwise, they have a massive information asymmetry and could very well be kind of abusing that power against the community.
Right. So in coming days and weeks, it would be better to be focused on how to improve liquidity on existing exchanges, right? How to get maybe more free listings like we had recently. Right, how to get bridges working, so how to improve situation on DEX, some new on-ramp methods like discussed in the community, for example, BISC, right? So, liquidity can be improved with the current tooling.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. We have one more question. Let's see. What excites you both from a development perspective for 2023? I'll let you start, Alex.
I think it would be the same as 2020. So, a lot of development, right? And finally, we also will do some research, right? So I'm going back to read papers. In order to implement them, not just out of curiosity. That's great, right? So that's actually quite exciting to catch up with recent developments.
Yeah, I would say 6.0 from the core side for me is the most exciting. In terms of the community, I'm really excited to watch Sigmanauts come together and become their own force in the ecosystem. And I would say probably on top, I think Rosenbridge is probably interesting because it potentially gives everybody that's building in the Ergo ecosystem access to more liquidity without permission, which will be great to see. Anything that you'd like to cover before we wrap it up, Alex?
I don't know. So I'm also reviewing contracts these days, from Cheese, right, in regards with P2P bonds and other financial instruments, and terahertz. So maybe we can have next community chat focused on some peer-to-peer financial applications. So we had not crowded at all, to be honest, but quite nice community chat on Tuesday, right? So let's have another chat on next Tuesday, and it would be maybe about peer-to-peer financial contracts. How's about that? What do you think, Joe?
Sounds good to me.
Right. So that's probably all for now.
All right. Everybody, my coffee. I have to go, so I'm gonna sign off here, wrap it up, and go refill. That way I can wake up a little bit. I hope everybody had we didn't get to. Feel free to come back next week, and we'll try to get things covered. Have a good one, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Bye. Have a good day.